They say desperation makes people do extraordinary things, and for Derek Coleman, a widowed father whose love for his daughter eclipsed his own hunger, that desperation turned into a moment of pure sacrifice. With no money left for groceries, he skipped his meal just to buy brand-new pencils and notebooks for his little girl. Watching from behind the store's shelves was a mysterious woman named Rebecca Thompson, someone who witnessed his kindness in more ways than one. What she did next would set off a chain of events no one could have predicted, proving that sometimes compassion sparks miracles in the most unexpected places. Derek Coleman's tiny, worn-down apartment was hardly big enough for two people, let alone the mountainous weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The peeling floral wallpaper in the living room had seen better days, and the battered furniture looked like it had survived countless garage sales before finally finding refuge here. Yet it was all Derek had, and for him it was enough as long as his 10-year-old daughter Amy had a place to sleep and room to call her own. Every morning he woke before sunrise, shoulders stiff from tossing and turning on the lumpy sofa. He let Amy have the only bedroom, wanting her to feel secure. Single fatherhood came with no manual, and every day felt like a tightrope walk between providing for his child and not letting his own exhaustion consume him. Sometimes he thought about the life he once had with his late wife Maria, but those memories felt too heavy, too painful to unwrap often. Money was tighter than ever. Derek juggled two part-time jobs, one as a security guard at Redwood Mall in Houston, Texas, and another at a local car wash on weekends. The pay barely covered rent, groceries, and the never-ending bills. And though he was constantly reminded of his economic strain, Amy's unwavering smile each morning fueled him. She was his world. That particular afternoon, while rummaging through discount flyers on the kitchen table, Derek realized it was nearly the start of a new school year. Amy needed fresh notebooks, pencils and crayons, basic supplies that every child in her class would have. He glanced at his wallet, counting the few wrinkled bills he had left. His chest tightened when he realized he could only buy those supplies or pay the gas bill, not both. Still, he knew he had to do it. Education was a beacon of hope for Amy's future. If sacrificing 1 or 2 meals meant she could have a decent chance at school, he would do it in a heartbeat. That decision to skip his own dinner might have gone unnoticed by the world, but it wouldn't go unnoticed in the cosmic ledger of kindness. After a quick shift at the car wash, Derek hurried home, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Amy," he called out softly. She was in her room, humming a little tune. He peered in. Her eyes lit up at the sight of him, and it reminded him precisely why he endured each day's trials. He told her he needed to pick up something from the store. She didn't ask for more details, trusting him, as she always did. As Derek left, he couldn't help feeling that the universe was waiting to test him again. And tested he would be. Struggle had become his constant companion. Yet through it all, a flicker of hope remained ignited by love for his daughter, and kept alive by a faith that someday his efforts would pay off. He never expected the turning point would come so soon, on a regular day at the local discount store, when someone else's gaze fell upon him at just the right moment. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Derek walked into Budget Town, a well-known discount store on the edge of Houston's 4th Ward. The store was packed with end-of-summer shoppers. Parents grabbed last-minute deals on backpacks and binders. College students leafed through cheap notebooks, trying to save a few bucks before classes started. Derek glanced at the price tags, carefully selecting each item he placed into his basket. A pack of no-name pencils cost $1.25. A pair of scissors was $2. Binders, notebooks, crayons each required calculation and a mental note of his budget. He only had about $15 in cash, so he had to make sure Amy's supplies took precedence over everything else. Gone were the days when he could buy whatever brand name the teacher recommended. Now the clearance rack was his best friend. He paused, noticing a sign advertising buy one, get one free on selected pens. For a moment he considered it. Pens always come in handy, but then remembered that Amy's teacher had specified pencils. Pens might be an unnecessary expense. He let out a small sigh, torn between wanting to give his daughter everything and the grim reality of what he could afford. Unaware that he was being observed, Derek weighed 2 different notebooks in his hands, comparing quality versus cost. The first was a slightly sturdier brand-name notebook, better paper for sure. The other was a thinner generic type, with the cover corners already curled. The price difference was 50 cents. It wasn't much in normal circumstances, but for Derek, even a $half could mean the difference between affording a snack or not later in the week. After a moment of reluctance, he gently placed the brand-name notebook back on the shelf and opted for the cheaper one. That was the moment Rebecca Thompson, standing in the next aisle, noticed him. She had come into Budget Town to grab a few household items, not expecting to witness this small but poignant drama unfolding a few steps away. Rebecca, a reserved and elegant woman in her early 30s, saw Derek's hesitation and the tired slump of his shoulders. There was something about him that tugged at her empathy. She watched how carefully he counted out his money and the defeated droop in his posture when he realized he couldn't afford a particular supply. Rebecca felt a pang in her chest. She'd grown up in a modest environment, but had never experienced such visible struggle. As she observed Derek, she wondered what kind of man would so painstakingly sacrifice for something as simple as school supplies. But then she saw the gentle smile playing on his face when he found an item on sale. It was the smile of a parent determined to give the best to his child, no matter how small or large. Derek finally made his way toward the cashier, placing his items on the belt. He tapped his foot nervously, hoping the total wouldn't exceed his meager sum. Rebecca, holding a small cart of groceries, lined up behind him, discreetly paying attention to every word exchanged between Derek and the cashier. When he heard the total $14.87, she could see the relief flood his features. Without so much as a granola bar for himself, Derek handed over the money. That was all he had, exact change, no leftover for dinner. He didn't buy a single thing that wasn't for his daughter. In that small moment he wore an expression of fulfillment, as if skipping his own meal was a non-issue compared to his daughter's happiness. Rebecca felt an inexplicable pull. She hadn't met this man, and yet she felt the urge to do something. Conflicted, she paid for her own groceries, mind buzzing with questions. A quiet voice inside urged her to follow him to see if he was truly all right, or if this was just another shopper going through a tough day. As a cautious woman, she wasn't one to meddle in strangers' affairs. But something about Derek Coleman changed her mind. Moments later, with her heart pounding, Rebecca found herself trailing behind him in the parking lot, keeping a careful distance. She wondered if she was about to make a grave mistake, or if this was the beginning of a story larger than she could ever imagine. Derek walked through the lot, juggling the flimsy plastic bag of school supplies and a few loose coins in his pocket. He had arrived by bus earlier, so his next destination was the bus stop along Westheimer Road. Rebecca quietly trailed behind, feeling an odd mixture of curiosity and guilt. She didn't want to alarm him. She didn't even know what she would say if he confronted her. Yet she continued, guided by a deep compassion she could not fully explain. It was nearly dusk. The summer sky was painted in orange and pink streaks, and the heat of the day was finally dissipating. Derek stood at the bus stop, pressing his lips together as he read the schedule. The next bus was 15 minutes away, which gave Rebecca a short window to decide whether to approach him. She could ask if he needed help, if he was short on money, or maybe if he had eaten. But somehow that all felt too forward. She hovered a few paces away, pretending to scroll on her phone. The bus arrived, and Derek climbed aboard, taking a seat near the front. Rebecca weighed her options. Was she really going to board the same bus, follow him further? She almost turned away, but something about Derek's earlier sacrifice tugged at her heartstrings. So she fished out her bus pass from her purse and got on, settling a few seats behind him. The bus rattled through the Houston streets, passing neon-lit diners and flickering street lamps. Each time Derek shifted in his seat, Rebecca tensed slightly, worried she might catch his eye. But he seemed engrossed in his own thoughts, possibly counting out the next day's expenses in his head. After about 20 minutes, Derek signaled for a stop. The bus squeaked to a halt in a neighborhood that was modest, even run down in places. Cracked sidewalks and chain-link fences lined the streets. Rebecca followed him out, ensuring she maintained enough distance to avoid suspicion. Night had nearly fallen by the time Derek reached his apartment building, a squat 2-story complex known as West Hills Grove. The sign out front had missing letters, so it read, West High, else grow E. Rebecca grimaced at the sight. The place looked badly in need of upkeep. The dim security light above the main door flickered as if it might give out at any second. Derek slipped inside with a tired sigh. Rebecca stood on the sidewalk, her heart pounding. She felt uncertain, out of place. She could see the shadows in the windows, hear distant voices from inside. If she lingered too long, someone might notice her loitering. But she couldn't bring herself to leave just yet. Did this man have enough to eat tonight? She doubted it, recalling the empty look on his face at the register. As if on cue, she remembered her own groceries still in the car trunk back at Budget Town. She'd been so captivated by his situation that she forgot she had driven there in her own vehicle. She needed to get back, but a silent resolve formed in her mind. She had to return. Maybe she'd approach him the next day, or perhaps offer something anonymous. Either way, she wasn't about to let this father's kindness go unnoticed. With a final glance at the old flickering apartment lights, Rebecca turned around and headed back to catch the next bus. Little did she know this was only the start of a spiral of events that would intertwine her life with Derek's, revealing the power of compassion in ways neither of them ever anticipated. Inside the cramped apartment, Derek set the plastic bag of supplies on the small dining table, which doubled as his workspace. The kitchen light was a solitary bulb that cast long, gloomy shadows across the living room. Amy emerged from her bedroom, excitement dancing in her eyes. "Did you get them?" she asked, her voice tinged with eager anticipation. Derek smiled, nodding. He emptied the items onto the table, showing her the brightly colored crayons, a new pencil case, and 2 notebooks, one for math, one for English. Amy let out a little squeal of joy, something so pure it made Derek's heart swell despite his exhaustion. "Thank you, Dad," she said, throwing her arms around him. In that moment, every sacrifice he'd made was more than worth it. "Anything for you, Princess?" he whispered, ruffling her hair. Amy examined each item as if it were a treasure. Derek watched her fondly, but soon realized the gnawing hunger in his stomach. He glanced at the nearly bare fridge. He had a half box of mac and cheese and a carton of milk that was just on the edge of expiration. If he cooked it, there'd be enough for Amy, and maybe a small portion left for him. He shrugged off the pang in his gut, remembering that missing a meal was not the end of the world. But he still felt a pang of guilt that this was their life barely making do, always on the edge. "You want mac and cheese for dinner?" he asked softly. "Yes." "Thank you, Dad," Amy replied, not detecting the guilt in his tone. He turned on the stove, stirring the noodles in the pot, feeling the weight of the day accumulate in his weary muscles. Derek's mind was already back at work tomorrow. He'd have a night shift at Redwood Mall, which meant he'd be on his feet from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. Then he'd have to wake up early to get Amy ready for school. The next day, he'd pick up a shift at the car wash. It never ended. After dinner, Amy retreated to her room, excitedly labeling her notebooks and stowing her supplies in her backpack. Derek settled on the couch, leaning his head back and closing his eyes. Tomorrow's meal was uncertain, but at least Amy had food in her belly tonight. He told himself he'd figure something out. He always did. Meanwhile, across town, Rebecca Thompson lay in bed, unable to stop thinking about the scene at the discount store. She replayed Derek's expression when he realized he only had enough money to buy supplies. The father's love for his child was strikingly evident. Why had it gripped her so strongly? She had seen struggling people before, donated to charities, but rarely did she feel so compelled to act personally. It dawned on her that compassion is not always about big gestures. Sometimes it's about small steps that can change the trajectory of another person's life. With that thought swirling in her mind, Rebecca decided she would go back to West Hills Grove, knock on Derek's door, and find a way to help somehow, any way she could. She had no idea the depth of the challenges Derek faced, or the twists fate had in store for both of them. But destiny has a habit of weaving the right people together at the right moments. And in the days to come, both Derek and Rebecca would find their worlds upended in ways that would reshape their futures forever. The next day started much the same for Derek. He woke to the screeching alarm at 5 a.m., dragged himself to the kitchen, and prepared a modest breakfast for Amy. Cereal and milk. He took a pass on eating, hoping to save the remaining slices of bread for her lunch. Amy noticed the dark circles under his eyes, but didn't say much. She had grown used to seeing her father tired. Still, she gave him a warm hug before heading off to catch the school bus. Then came the job hunt. Derek had been tirelessly searching for more stable employment, something with benefits, consistent hours, and a better wage. His part-time gigs were unsustainable in the long run, especially with a child to care for. So he fired up his aging laptop scanning job postings across Houston. Nothing new. Each application felt like throwing a paper airplane into a hurricane, never sure where it would land, if anywhere at all. By midday, he decided to catch a short nap before his shift at Redwood Mall. Just as he was drifting off, there was a knock on his apartment door. Confused, he rarely had visitors. He got up and peered through the peephole. A woman with light brown hair and an air of quiet confidence stood there holding a small paper bag. Derek hesitated. Should he open it? He did, albeit cautiously. Yes, he asked, trying not to sound too wary. "Hi, Rebecca," said, forcing a gentle smile. "My name is Rebecca Thompson. This might sound really strange, but I saw you at Budget Town yesterday." Derek stiffened, a flicker of panic crossing his features. Was she from Child Services a debt collector? Someone who'd traced him? 100 worst-case scenarios ran through his mind in a split second. I'm sorry. I don't remember seeing you, he replied, voice guarded. Rebecca swallowed. This was more awkward than she'd anticipated. I know. I saw you buying school supplies and, well, I noticed how careful you were with your money. Then this might sound insane, but I followed you to see if everything was okay. I didn't want to intrude, but she stopped, noticing Derek's eyes widen. She pressed on. I just felt compelled to help. An uneasy silence filled the corridor. Derek wasn't sure if he should slam the door or invite her in. He had no idea who she was, only that she'd somehow tracked him down. But there was a sincerity in her gaze that quelled his initial apprehension. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. Rebecca held up the paper bag. "I brought some groceries. Nothing big, just a few things. Please don't take this the wrong way. I'm not trying to offend you or anything. I saw you skip a meal to buy supplies for your daughter, and I wanted to help." A swirl of emotions hit Derek. Pride, shame, gratitude, confusion. All at once. The last thing he wanted was charity, but the reality of his empty fridge forced him to swallow his pride. "That's thank you. You didn't have to." "Really?" They stood there, a sort of uncomfortable alliance forming between them. Rebecca offered a cautious smile, extending the bag. Derek accepted it, heart-hammering. He didn't expect the tears that sprang to his eyes the moment he felt the weight of the groceries. It wasn't just the food, it was someone caring. As the door closed, Derek realized he'd just taken a step into unknown territory. This wasn't how he pictured receiving help, and certainly not from a stranger he'd never noticed. But life had a peculiar way of testing a man's resolve and also providing unexpected answers. Little did he know this was just the beginning of Rebecca's impact on his life. Derek set the paper bag on the kitchen counter. Inside, he found a loaf of bread, a small jar of peanut butter, fresh apples, and even some canned soup. He ran his fingertips over the groceries as though they were made of gold. A simple act of kindness had never made him feel so overwhelmed. Yet there was also a sting to his pride he was supposed to provide for his daughter, not rely on the benevolence of a stranger. He glanced out the window, half expecting to see Rebecca still there, but she was gone. The corridor was empty, and the hush of midday fell over the apartment complex. Feeling somewhat lost, he sank into a kitchen chair. Thoughts swirled. Why me? Why now? And what would he tell Amy? He couldn't dwell on it long because he had to get ready for his security shift at Redwood Mall. The uniform was crisp, but worn from countless washes. He pinned on his name tag D. Coleman and double-checked that his baton and flashlight were in place. A single father's day never ends, he reminded himself, forcing a smile in the mirror. Later that afternoon, Derek clocked in at the mall. The place hummed with shoppers browsing end-of-season sales. Scented candles from Bath and Body Works mingled with the aroma of freshly baked pretzels. He made his rounds, scanning the faces of passers-by for any sign of trouble or shoplifters. But his mind kept returning to Rebecca's visit. During a short break, he stopped by the staff lounge to drink water and gather his thoughts. Jake Carter, a fellow security guard, noticed Derek's distraction. "Everything okay, man?" "You seem off," Jake asked. Derek sighed, unsure how much to reveal. "Just life stuff. Bills. My daughter's new school year. Had an unexpected visitor who wanted to help. I'm grateful, but also, well, you know." Jake nodded sympathetically. Hey, sometimes help comes from unexpected places. If it lightens your load, might be worth accepting. That evening, as Derek was ushering the last of the shoppers out at closing time, he was startled to see Rebecca again. She wasn't shopping. She stood near the entrance, looking uncertain. Derek felt a jolt of anxiety. Had she followed him here too? But when their eyes met, her expression softened. "Hi again," she said, stepping forward. I'm sorry if I crossed a line earlier." Derek's shoulders relaxed a fraction. "It's okay," he replied, though he still felt uneasy. "What brings you here?" Rebecca bit her lip. "I was hoping we could talk for a moment. Not here, though. Maybe at the coffee shop across the street." "My treat." He hesitated. He needed to catch the bus soon, but the coffee shop was open late. The thought of a warm drink and a chance to understand why this woman was going out of her way was tempting. "I have a few minutes," he said eventually. They walked together under the neon glow of the streetlights. Rebecca seemed nervous, clasping her purse strap. Derek kept a measured distance, uncertain, but curious. Once inside the cozy shop, they found a quiet corner booth. The smell of roasted beans enveloped them as Rebecca handed him a menu. Derek cleared his throat. "So you want to tell me what this is about?" "It's not every day a stranger shows up at my door with groceries." Rebecca nodded, eyes shifting from the menu to meet his gaze. "I know it's weird, but I saw how much you sacrificed for your daughter, and it got me thinking about a time when someone helped me too when I least expected it. I've been in a position to give back, but I rarely do it in person." For a moment, Derek let his guard down. Compassion. Maybe that's what this was. Yet he couldn't ignore the sinking sensation that his life was under a microscope. He didn't like feeling pitied or judged. Still, there was a part of him that recognized how genuine she seemed. Without fully knowing why, he found himself opening up just a sliver. "I appreciate what you did. It's been rough, but we get by." Rebecca offered a small, tentative smile. "If there's anything else I can do, within reason, I just want you to know I'm here." Silence lingered between them, thick with unspoken fears and hesitant gratitude. Unbeknownst to both, this conversation was the start of a partnership that would weave their lives together in ways neither had anticipated. And behind that moment of honesty, fate was quietly orchestrating a bigger plan, one that would soon test both of their hearts. Amy Coleman sat on the living room floor, coloring a picture of a bright, idyllic home, a stark contrast to the dim surroundings of their actual apartment. She had made a habit of drawing houses with sunny windows, white picket fences and flower-filled gardens. Perhaps it was her way of imagining a future she hoped to have. It was early evening, and Derek was scheduled to work the late shift again. After rummaging through the kitchen, Amy found an apple and some peanut butter courtesy of Rebecca's thoughtful donation. She sliced the apple carefully, remembering her father's instructions on using the dullest butter knife they had. Then she made a plate to share with him before he rushed out the door. A knock on the door startled her. She froze, recalling her father's caution never to open the door to strangers. But she heard a voice that sounded vaguely familiar. "Amy. It's Miss Thompson. Rebecca. From yesterday." Amy peered through the peephole. She recognized Rebecca from earlier in the week, though she'd only caught a glimpse of her. Amy hesitated, then opened the door just a crack. "Hi. My dad's not here right now." Rebecca offered a gentle smile. "That's okay, sweetheart. I was just dropping by to see if you or your dad needed anything else. Maybe a ride to school or something." Amy blinked. No one had ever offered such help before, other than a distant neighbor, Mr. Brown, who once lent them an old fan. I think we're okay, Amy said politely. She was cautious but also curious about this kind stranger. Rebecca nodded, sensing Amy's uncertainty. I understand. Well, I'll just leave this bag with a few more groceries on the doorstep in case you need them. Please tell your dad I stopped by. Amy swallowed, torn between politeness and the survival instincts her father had ingrained in her. I'll tell him she finally managed. Thank you. The door closed, leaving Amy to wonder who Rebecca really was. She set the bag on the kitchen counter. Inside were more apples, a small carton of milk bread, and a note that read, "Keep smiling." Amy traced the inked letters, thinking how seldom they received notes that weren't bills or late notices. When Derek arrived home an hour later, worn out and sweaty from a day of doubling shifts, he instantly noticed the new groceries and the note. His eyes flicked to Amy's solemn face. "Rebecca came by," Amy said quietly, trying to gauge her father's reaction. He inhaled, both grateful and uncomfortable. Did she say anything else? She asked if we needed a ride to school or something. Amy replied, fiddling with a loose thread on her sleeve. I told her we're okay. Derek managed a shaky smile. You did right. We can take care of ourselves, can't we, kiddo? Amy nodded, though a small part of her wondered if accepting help might make life easier for both of them. That night, while Amy finished her homework, Derek stared at the new groceries and the cheerful note. He found himself torn between the relief that someone cared and the shame that he needed caring for. Still, he remembered Jake Carter's words. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Perhaps it was time to let go of some pride for Amy's sake, if not his own. As father and daughter prepared for another day, they both felt the growing presence of Rebecca Thompson in their lives, as though she were becoming a guardian angel they'd never asked for, but desperately needed. And neither of them could predict just how crucial her role would become in the weeks to follow. For the next several days, Derek tried to return to a sense of normalcy. He still woke up before dawn, prepared Amy's breakfast, and headed out to whichever job beckoned. He also tried to ignore the gentle taps on his door whenever Rebecca would drop by. Sometimes he'd open it, exchange a few polite words, and she'd hand him a small care package, some fresh fruit, a carton of juice, or a homemade dinner she claimed she had extra portions of. Other times he'd pretend not to be home, feeling his pride flare up. Rebecca's kindness was relentless, but never forceful. She never demanded anything or pried into his personal affairs. She simply offered a consistent helping hand. And slowly, whether out of necessity or begrudging acceptance, Derek began to rely on her gifts. A can of soup here, a bag of groceries there. It all added up, bridging the gap between his paycheck and their empty cupboards. One evening, Amy came running into the living room, waving a piece of paper. Dad, I got an A on my math quiz, she announced triumphantly. Derek's face lit up. That's fantastic, Princess. I'm so proud of you. We should celebrate, Amy said hopefully. Maybe a little ice cream. Derek's heart squeezed. The idea of spending a few extra dollars on ice cream felt luxurious, even though it was a simple treat. He mentally tallied his remaining funds bus fare for the week, partial rent for the end of the month, electricity bill looming. After a short pause, he mustered a smile. Of course. Let's do it. We'll go this weekend, I promise. As if on cue, there was a soft knock at the door. Derek opened it to find Rebecca, who shyly held out a small cake box. I baked something, she said, eyes bright. Wanted to share. Thank you, Derek responded, glancing at the label on the box, chocolate cake with sprinkles. He shook his head incredulously. "You're always showing up at the perfect time." Rebecca shrugged. "I just like baking, that's all." And it looked like Amy could use a treat. Amy's eyes glimmered at the mention of sweets. Without hesitation, she invited Rebecca in. Soon the three of them sat around the small dining table, eating cake and celebrating Amy's test score. It felt almost normal, like a family moment, though they were hardly that. In the warm glow of the overhead bulb, Derek caught himself studying Rebecca's face. She wasn't just kind. She was compassionate in a way that felt deep-rooted, as if she carried her own secrets. He'd catch glimpses of something haunted in her eyes whenever she thought no one was looking. But he never asked, never pushed. She was the one giving help, not asking for it, after all. Later, as Rebecca prepared to leave, Derek followed her to the door. I don't know how I can repay you," he said softly, the weight of her generosity pressing on him. "You don't have to," she replied, offering a gentle smile. "Sometimes people do things for each other. No strings attached." But Derek understood that in life, nothing was truly free. The debt he was accruing wasn't financial, it was emotional. A silent sense of responsibility toward Rebecca was growing in him. He owed her a kindness in return, a gesture of gratitude or support. He just didn't know how or when to deliver it. As she disappeared down the dimly lit corridor, Derek felt an unfamiliar flutter in his chest. Gratitude, confusion, and something else, hope. Perhaps, or maybe it was the beginning of a bond he never saw coming. For a man who had all but given up on finding light amid the shadows of life's hardships, Rebecca Thompson was steadily becoming a guiding star. With each passing day, Derek found it harder to avoid the growing warmth he felt for Rebecca. It wasn't just about groceries or kindness anymore. She would pop in to help Amy with her homework, or offer Derek a ride to work if she was heading in the same direction. She seemed genuinely invested in their well-being, and Amy adored her. The little girl began sharing details about her school days with Rebecca, confiding in her as though she were a beloved aunt. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Rumors began to circulate in the apartment complex. Linda Carter, a long-time tenant, who often peered out her window and noted everyone's comings and goings, started gossiping about that well-dressed woman visiting the Colemans. Some speculated she was a social worker investigating child welfare. Others thought she was Derek's boss or some debt collector. Derek tried to ignore the whispers, but it made him uneasy knowing how quickly rumors could tarnish reputations in such a small community. One afternoon, as Derek returned from the car wash, a stern-faced Harold Stone, the landlord, blocked him in the hallway. "Mr. Coleman," he began, "I've been hearing talk that you're behind on rent again, and you've got some outside person practically living here." Derek stiffened. "I'm doing my best to keep up with payments. I'll have the money soon." Stone sniffed, unimpressed. "Soon doesn't cut it. And I don't allow subletting or hidden tenants. Make sure you're clear on that." "She's not living here," Derek clarified, anger creeping into his voice. "She's just a friend." Stone rolled his eyes. "Friend or not, rent's due in full by Friday, or I'll have to take action." "Understood." Derek's hands curled into fists at his sides, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Understood," he muttered. Stone walked away, leaving Derek feeling a surge of frustration and despair. He was 2 weeks behind on rent, scrounging every penny, and now the landlord was breathing down his neck. The kindness from Rebecca had momentarily distracted him from his grim financial reality, but it hadn't resolved it. Worse yet, Derek felt a pang of guilt at the thought that he might be dragging Rebecca into his troubles. She had become something of a lifeline, but he was aware that her reputation or safety could be compromised if Stone decided to make false accusations. He resolved to be more cautious about her visits for both their sakes. That night, lying awake on the lumpy sofa, Derek thought about the upcoming deadline. He needed a quick infusion of cash to pay the rent. Short of a miracle, he was on the verge of eviction. His eyes flicked to the small lamp near the couch, flickering ominously. Even the light bulbs seemed uncertain in his world. Amy slept soundly in the next room, her gentle breaths a lullaby that reminded him of his responsibilities. He wondered what Rebecca would say if she knew how dire his situation had become. Would she offer to pay his rent? Would she loan him the money? The thought both comforted and horrified him. Accepting her help might plunge him deeper into dependency, intensifying the sense of debt he felt. As night stretched on, Derek found no answers. Only one unwavering truth swam in his mind. Come what may, he would protect his daughter's sense of security, even if it meant shouldering the burden of eviction alone. And in the silent darkness, a seed of desperation took root, one that would lead him to an unexpected choice, altering the course of their lives. 2 days later, Derek stood outside Redwood Mall at the end of his shift. The neon lights flashed overhead, and the parking lot was nearly empty. He had just spent his last bus fare getting here, and he knew he'd have to walk home tonight, an hour-long trek through dimly lit streets. But rent was due in less than 24 hours, and he was still short by $50, a small fortune given his circumstances. As he started his journey home, he heard a voice call out behind him. Derek. It was Rebecca stepping out from a nearby car. Need a ride? He froze. His pride screamed at him to refuse, but the blisters on his feet begged otherwise. With a tired nod, he accepted. Thank you, he said softly, sliding into the passenger seat of her compact sedan. Everything okay? She asked, as she pulled out of the mall's parking lot. Derek hesitated. Part of him wanted to spill everything, how the landlord was threatening eviction, how he couldn't sleep at night because his mind spun with worry. But he also feared loading more burdens onto her. I'm managing, he replied, staring at the passing street lamps. Just a lot on my plate. Rebecca didn't press. She'd sensed his reluctance before and didn't want to overstep. Instead, she talked about her day, how she had helped a friend with a fundraiser for a local shelter. Despite her comfortable appearance, she seemed deeply involved in charitable work, though she never bragged about it. They arrived at West Hills Grove sooner than Derek had hoped. He almost wished for a longer drive, the gentle hum of the car, a temporary solace from his relentless worries. When they parked, Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out a plain white envelope. I wanted to give you this, she said, her voice quavering slightly. Before you say anything, just hear me out. I got a bonus at work and I don't really need it, so I thought you could use it more. Derek's eyes widened in disbelief. Rebecca. He started shaking his head. I can't accept money from you. Please, she insisted, holding the envelope toward him. Don't think of it as charity. Think of it as a loan, if that helps. Pay me back whenever you can or not at all. I trust you. His heart hammered. He glanced at the envelope, already guessing it would be enough to cover his immediate rent shortfall. Yet the shame of taking her money overwhelmed him. Still, the image of Amy forced him to consider it. He couldn't bear the thought of uprooting her life again if they were evicted. With trembling hands, he took the envelope, tears brimming in his eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." Rebecca smiled gently, her own eyes misty. "You already have. You're raising a wonderful daughter, Derek. That's thanks enough." They sat in silence for a long moment, a current of emotion passing between them. Finally, Derek mustered a soft goodnight and stepped out of the car, the envelope clutched against his chest. That evening, after carefully counting the money, he breathed a sigh of relief. He could pay the rent in full, avoid eviction, and still have a little left to buy groceries. It felt like a reprieve, a lifeline in a stormy sea. He also felt the weight of a new kind of debt, one of the heart. He promised himself he'd repay her even if she never asked for it. But deep down he sensed that the real debt she sought wasn't financial. The intangible nature of her kindness lingered a reminder that perhaps what Rebecca truly needed was human connection. Something Derek was beginning to feel more than ready to offer. Weeks turned into a month, and the hush of autumn settled into the Houston air. Amy was thriving at school, her notebooks filled with meticulous notes and bright doodles. She had new shoes now, an off-brand pair, but sturdy enough thanks to an extra shift Derek managed to pick up at the car wash. Though life was still hard, the threat of eviction had receded, replaced by cautious optimism. During this time, Derek's bond with Rebecca deepened in unexpected ways. What began as gratitude and guarded acceptance blossomed into genuine friendship. They learned little pieces of each other's pasts. Derek told her about Maria, his late wife, and the struggles he faced as a new widower with an infant daughter. Rebecca confided that she'd endured a painful breakup years ago, and hadn't quite felt at home anywhere since. Derek found himself looking forward to her visits, not just for the practical help, but for the comforting presence she brought. She was a beacon in a life riddled with storms. And for Rebecca, seeing the world through Derek and thus Amy's eyes rekindled a sense of purpose. She realized that her charitable donations in the past, while helpful, lacked the personal touch of truly seeing someone's struggles and being there day in and day out. One Sunday afternoon, they all decided to take a trip to a local park. It was a rare treat for Derek and Amy, time off with no pressing financial crisis overshadowing them. They fed ducks at the pond, took pictures by the water fountain, and laughed as Amy chased after squirrels. Rebecca brought a picnic basket with homemade sandwiches and lemonade, and they dined under the shelter of a grand oak tree. "What's your dream, Dad?" Amy asked out of the blue, swinging her legs beneath the picnic table. Derek paused, chewing on a bite of sandwich. He glanced at Rebecca, then back at his daughter. "My dream? Well, it used to be opening an auto repair shop, or maybe going back to school to become a mechanic." He shrugged, a little embarrassed to share. "But life got busy. You know." Amy nodded thoughtfully as though she fully grasped the weight of adult responsibilities. Then she turned to Rebecca. "What about you?" "Miss Rebecca." A sadness flickered over Rebecca's features, gone almost as soon as it appeared. "I've done most of what I set out to do, traveling, building a career. But now I guess I dream of a home, a place where I truly belong." The conversation trailed off into a warm silence. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden rays through the branches. Derek felt a surge of emotion, recognizing a kinship in Rebecca's longing. Home had been a fleeting concept for him since Maria's death, one he tried to rebuild for Amy's sake, but never truly found for himself. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and in that moment, Derek wanted to say so much that she belonged with them, that she'd changed his life in ways he could never repay. But words failed him. Instead, he reached across the table and squeezed Rebecca's hand. She squeezed back. Later, when evening draped the park in shadows, they packed up and headed home, their hearts lighter than they'd been in a long time. Neither Derek nor Rebecca spoke of it directly, but the sense of something deeper affection, perhaps even love, had quietly taken root between them. In the hush of the late evening as they parted ways, they both sensed that life would never be the same again. And for the first time, that realization felt like a blessing rather than a curse. The day that Derek Coleman received the life-altering news started like any other. He was slumped on the couch scrolling through online job postings when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally he ignored such calls, bill collectors or scams, but something made him answer this one. "Hello, is this Mr. Coleman?" a polite female voice asked. "Yes, my name is Pamela Wright. I'm calling from the Redwood Foundation Scholarship Program. We received your application for a mechanical engineering certification. I'm pleased to inform you that your application has been approved for a full scholarship." Derek almost dropped the phone. He'd forgotten about that scholarship application, one he'd filled out weeks ago at the local library. He recalled how he hesitated on the final submission, thinking it was a long shot at best. Now they were telling him it was a done deal. His mind swirled. A full scholarship meant not only free tuition, but also a monthly stipend for living expenses. It was his chance to finally pursue the dream of becoming a certified mechanic. As soon as he ended the call, he let out a whoop of joy. Amy, alarmed, ran out of her room to see what was happening. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked, wide-eyed. "We did it, Princess," Derek said, scooping her into a hug. "Dad's going to school." That evening, he couldn't wait to share the news with Rebecca. He asked her to come over for dinner. This time he would cook. After rummaging through the fridge and his meager pantry, he managed to whip up a simple pasta dish, not gourmet, but heartfelt. When she arrived, Derek greeted her with a grin that stretched from ear to ear. Over dinner, he relayed the entire scholarship conversation. Rebecca's eyes shone with pride. "I'm so thrilled for you," she exclaimed, reaching across the table to hold his hand. "This is exactly what you deserve." Derek felt a surge of gratitude so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. For the first time in years, his life wasn't just about surviving. It was about growing, moving forward. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said softly, glancing at Amy. "Both of you." Amy giggled clearly, excited about her dad's bright future. The little living room felt radiant, as if the peeling wallpaper and worn-out furniture faded into the background of an emerging new reality. After dinner, once Amy went to bed, Derek and Rebecca stepped out onto the apartment balcony. The city lights glowed in the distance. Rebecca leaned against the railing, her hair gently rustling in the night breeze. Derek joined her, the scholarship acceptance letter clutched in his hand. "I've been thinking," he said, voice low. "All this time you've been helping us. I kept wondering how I'd ever repay you. Now I realize you never wanted money. You just wanted to see us happy." Rebecca turned to him, eyes brimming with unshed tears. "What I want," she whispered, "is to share in that happiness." In a tender moment that felt both surprising and utterly natural, Derek closed the gap between them, pressing his lips softly against hers. The city noises faded, the ache of hardship dulled. In that brief instant, all that mattered was the two of them. Two souls finding solace in each other. When they finally pulled apart, Rebecca traced her fingers across Derek's cheek. "I've got something I need to tell you," she said, voice trembling. "I never mentioned it, because I didn't want you to feel obligated. My family. We're actually quite well off. My father's company has done very well, and I inherited a sizable trust. I don't usually talk about it because I've seen how money can complicate things, but I want you to know now, if you need any help, tuition, living expenses, anything, I'm here. Stunned. Derek felt tears sting his eyes. He'd suspected she was well-to-do, but not to this extent. "All this time you've been a hidden millionaire?" he asked, voice shaky. Rebecca laughed through her tears. "Yes, but it doesn't matter. What matters is you can pursue your dreams without fear." For a long moment they held each other on that balcony, the city's heartbeat pounding below. In the wake of revelations, burdens, and hope, a new horizon stretched before them. Derek would become the mechanic he always dreamed of being. Amy would grow up in a world where her father no longer had to choose between dinner and school supplies. And Rebecca at long last found a home for her heart. Sometimes miracles manifest in the smallest ways. A loaf of bread, a borrowed ride, a gentle hand on a shoulder. But sometimes they blossom into something far grander, a life renewed, a family reborn, and a love that defies all odds. Thank you for journeying with us through the story of Derek Coleman, a single father who sacrificed everything for his daughter, only to be blessed by the kindness of a mysterious stranger. Through hardship, heartbreak, and a simple act of compassion, we witnessed how one moment of empathy can spark a chain of life-changing events. In the end, Derek didn't just find relief from his financial struggles. He discovered love, support, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of selflessness, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you help spread stories of hope and kindness to others who may need inspiration. Together, let's continue to prove that compassion and love can indeed transform lives, one humble act at a time. Thank you for watching.